Advanced techniques for solving by elimination. Our question says, solve the following system of equations. And we have the equation 0.02x plus 0.5y equals negative 4.34, and 1/2 x minus 5/3 y equals 19. So when a question says to solve, it's asking us to find the point of intersection between these two lines. And the method of elimination is where we try to eliminate or get rid of either our x or y terms. So these ones here are a little trickier because they have decimals and fractions. So trying to find a common coefficient between a decimal and a fraction can be a little bit tricky. So one of the things you can do is before you start doing your elimination is you can try to find a way to get rid of the decimals and the fractions. So when you're dealing with a decimal, a nice little trick is if you need to move a number over a decimal place, you can multiply by 10. If you want to move 2 decimal places, we would multiply by 100. If I want to move 3 decimal places, we're going to multiply by 1,000. So here I notice this has 2 decimal places, 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places. I want to get rid of 2 decimal places, so I'm going to multiply by 100. So I add a 0 for every decimal place I'd like to move it over. So if I multiply this by 100, 0.02 times 100 is 2x. 0.5 times 100 is 50y. And negative 4.34 times 100 is negative 434. And you'll notice that I now no longer have any decimals. Right? Now, fractions are a little bit different. It's a little bit trickier. So when you're dealing with fractions, if you want to try to get rid of the fractions, we could get a common denominator. What we're going to do instead is we're going to look for what a good common denominator might be for this equation and then multiply by that number. So I notice that we have a denominator of 2, we have a denominator of 3, and that 19 secretly has a denominator of 1. So something that 2, 3, and 1 would all go into would be 6. So I'm going to take this one and multiply by 6. So I'm going to multiply everything in that equation by 6. So 1/2 times 6. This 6 is secretly a 6 over 1. So I would do 1 times 6 is 6. 2 times 1 is 2. So I get 6 over 2x. 5 times 6 is 30. So it's negative 30. And 3 times 1 is 3y. 19 times 6 is 114. And 1 times 1 is 1. So I still have fractions, but if you give us a second, we won't have them for very long. I'm going to recopy down the 2x plus 50y equals negative 434. Now, 6 divided by 2 works out nicely. It gives me 3x. 30 divided by 3 is negative 10y. And 114 divided by 1 is 114. So I did it in 2 separate steps here, but you could have done this where you did 1 times 6 is 6, and then divided by 2 is 3. So you could have done it in 1 step on your calculator, but I did it in 2 little steps to get my equations here. So now you'll notice that my equations do not have decimal, they do not have fractions, and I can just solve them by elimination using the method that we've already learned. So what we want to do first is decide whether we want to eliminate x's or y's. So I always look to see if any of them have the same coefficient. Unfortunately, neither of these do. And then I just look to see which one I think would be easier. So I have a 2 and a 3, which would have a common coefficient of 6. And I have a 50 and a 10, so I could maybe go for 50. It doesn't really matter, whatever you like better. I think I might actually go for these ones, just because I only have to multiply one of the equations, because this is already a 50 And if I multiply this by 10, I'll get a 50. So I'm going to leave that one alone. Multiply this one by 5. And I leave top equation the same. Bottom equation, we're going to multiply everything there by 5. So 5 times 3 is 15x. 5 times negative 10 is negative 50y. And remember, you want to have one being a positive and one being a negative. If they were both positive, I would have multiplied by a negative 5 here. Or if they were both negative, I would also have multiplied by a negative 5 to change the sign. And then 114 times 5 is 570. So now that we have the same coefficient, but with different signs on my y's, I'm going to take the two equations and add them together. So 2x plus 15x is 17x. 50 minus 50 is 0. If you need to put the 0 in, put the 0 in. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave that blank. And then negative 434 plus 570 is 136. So now I notice the y's are gone. I just have an x and some numbers. So I'm going to solve for x by dividing both sides by 17. 136 divided by 17 is 8. So I get the value x equals 8, which tells me that these two lines intersect and that the x part of that coordinate is 8. And now I need to find the y part of the coordinate. So to find the y, we have some options. I could take the 8 and put it back into the first equation. I could take the 8 and put it back into the second equation. Or I could take the equations here, and instead of eliminating for y, I could eliminate for x. And I think I might do that this time. So I'm going to take these equations. I'm just going to rewrite them down. So I have 2x plus 50y equals negative 434, and 3x, take away 10y, equals 114. So I didn't go back to the one with the fractions and the decimals because I already figured out what they were without fractions and decimals. And this time I am going to eliminate for the x's. So to eliminate for the x's, I need to have the same coefficient. So 2 and 3 both go into 6. So to get that first one to be a 6, I'm going to multiply by 3. To get the second one to be a 6, I'm going to multiply by 2. I also notice that their coefficients have the same sign. So one of them needs to become negative. So it doesn't matter. We could either do negative 3 or we could do negative 2. I think I'm going to make this one negative so that they get opposite signs. So 2 times 3 is 6x. 50 times 3 is 150y. And 434 times 3 is negative 1,302. All right, and then the second one, 6 times negative 2 is negative 6x. Negative 10 times negative 2 is positive 20y. And 114 times negative 2 is negative 228. So now that we have the same coefficient on the x's, except with opposite signs, we're going to add the two equations together. So 6x take away 6x, they cancel each other out. 150 plus 20 is 170y. And negative 1,302 plus negative 228 is negative 1,530. I used my calculator to do that. And then to solve for y, we just need to divide by 170. And I end up with negative 9. So the two lines intersect at the point 8 and negative 9. So the solution is 8, negative 9. And that's solving by elimination when you have fractions and decimals.